And we start, of course, in the United States, where the race to see who the next president of the United States of America is in full swing. Counting across much of the United States in full swing at this time, with the focus on a number of key battleground states. And one of the most important, of course, is Florida, which is crucial for President Donald Trump if he is to remain in the White House. And so far, it's a tight race, it would seem. Democratic challenger Joe Biden leads with 135 electoral college votes to Trump's 108. That is at least accurate as of about 7 minutes ago. So for more on this election, we cross live now to our U.S. correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who is in America as the United States decides. Sherwin, good morning. And of course, those battleground states, that is what is the focus for everybody right now.
Yes, and it's been the focus for much of this election as we've built up to Election Day here in the United States, Sakina, and the focus still remains on those key swing states. What I can tell you is that traditional Democratic strongholds are going the traditional way in Joe Biden's corner, and the traditional Republican strongholds are following suit, following the incumbent President Donald Trump. So if I were to step out of this map, this is kind of an electoral college breakdown in terms of how the traditional states go, and this section is kind of remaining red for Donald Trump in summary, and the blue states, the blue areas are sticking with the president. So the focus now then becomes who gets to 270 and how do they do that? They do that with the gray areas behind me, places like Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and the rest. And we still don't have any calls from any of the swing states. I can tell you in Florida, the president has eked out about a 300,000 vote lead. So Florida looks like it's going to trend Donald Trump's way, which is absolutely critical because without Florida, Sakina, you do not win the White House as a Republican. Yes, you can still win it as a Democrat without Florida. And this is what Joe Biden will now be hoping for. We're still outstanding in Georgia, where he's been in touch in terms of the polls. Very, very close in Georgia. Some big precincts yet to come in North Carolina. This is a Republican state that Joe Biden is hoping to turn blue, still too close to call. And what Joe Biden wants to do up here is resurrect what they call the blue wall in the Midwest. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, 3 states that actually determined Donald Trump's victory by about 70,000 votes against Hillary Clinton in 2016. This is a very, very big, important focus for the Democrats. Pennsylvania still too close to call. Michigan still too close to call. Wisconsin still too close to call. So, as much as we've been talking in the build-up to November 3rd about the swing states, in terms of the Electoral College, the popular vote matters less than winning as many states to get you to 270 Electoral College votes, Sakina.
And Sherwin, I know you said it is still too early to call, but speaking about that blue wall and the need for Biden to claw back Michigan, Ohio and Pennsylvania, especially, he needs those that Clinton lost in the previous election to Donald Trump. What are the projections at this stage for those 3, especially at this stage?
Here's the thing with predictions so far. Many of the polls showed Joe Biden, exceeding expectations in Florida, a 3 to 5 to 6 point lead in Florida. The president is outperforming that poll. There was also Joe Biden with an edge in Georgia. The president is also in touch. Similar sentiments that we are seeing in North Carolina. So the polls have certainly given Joe Biden about a 5-point lead in Pennsylvania and a 7-point lead, up to a 10-point lead, a 10-point lead in Wisconsin, but the polls matter less today than they did yesterday because now we actually have the actual results coming in and the president is in touch. It's too close to call in those regions, so it's going to go down to the wire. The sentiment still favors Joe Biden in terms of the numbers we've seen before this. A lot of precincts still reporting. Places like Pennsylvania, for example, each state, Sakina, it's good for our viewers to remember this, each state in the United States, 50 of them have 50 different rules as to how to tabulate their electoral ballots and the results. So a place like Florida, for example, is allowed to start counting their ballots as they come in before Election Day. A place like Pennsylvania, you're only allowed as election officials to open those mail-in ballots on November 3rd. So they could only start the process of counting today, whereas Florida could start weeks in advance. And so that's why the numbers are coming in much faster from a place like Florida as opposed to a place like Pennsylvania. So the concern with Pennsylvania is that by only tomorrow, maybe later morning tomorrow, will we get, my tomorrow, certainly later your in the day for you, we'll get a better sense of how Pennsylvania will go. But there are different permutations in different states in the country, and that complicates our ability to tell you exactly how things will go and by when and what time. One of the big questions is, when are we going to know the results, Sherwin? Sherwin does not know, Sakina.
So, Sherwin, we'll take that. You don't know. Nobody seems to know at this point. But, of course, it's a record turnout for this particular election. And what does that mean in terms of especially the early votes that were cast? Because there was concern as to whether every vote will be counted for one thing.
Well, larger turnouts historically in the United States election favor Democrats. So with mail-in ballots and, the aspersions that the president has consistently tried to cast on the veracity of some of these mail-in ballots, particularly the counting of them post-election day, which is not an anomaly in the United States. There's a long tradition of ballots coming in, particularly absentee ballots, the military that votes abroad. Ballots are counted after the polls close in some areas. And before, it takes about a week for electoral results in the United States to be certified. So there's nothing strange about counting votes later than usual. So, that is certainly something we are watching very closely. There is a prediction of a very high turnout, about 150 million people to vote in this election. And the idea that accompanied that is that it favors Democrats. But there is a thing called sentiment. And the sentiment so far tonight is that the president is doing better than expected. Why do we say that? Because, he's doing pretty well in Florida. That's an unexpected number. He's in touch in Georgia. And based on, just the coronavirus pandemic, Sakina, the fact that a majority of Americans don't trust what the president says on the pandemic, the expectation was that the numbers we were seeing in terms of the early vote, the surge in those numbers was being driven by this pandemic and the frustration that people were feeling in terms of the lack of progress in mitigating the impact of the virus. So, lots of analysis still to come, as the numbers come in, who voted how did the demographic shifts? There's been a lot of talk about the women vote moving towards Biden. We talk a lot about the suburban vote and the impact that that's going to have. Areas that surround big cities that tend to trend Democratic. The suburbs on the outlying areas of those cities are now also supposedly trending Democrat. But, that needs to be borne out by the numbers we are seeing tonight, and that will only become clearer as we get into Wednesday morning here and a bit later for you in South Africa, Sakina.
So just to conclude it for this segment, Sherwin, the race for the Electoral College votes, where are we now?
Right, so 192 for Biden, 108 for Trump. But that basically tracks with traditional strongholds. If Biden were to hold places like California, places like Washington State, New York, Connecticut, states that traditionally go Democrat, it gets him to about over 200 Electoral College votes. So he has a built-in advantage in terms of getting into 270. What Trump gets is just over 100. He's about at 108 already. So this middle section is holding true to form in terms of support for the president. What becomes critical now to get him to 270 is if he does a bit of a clean sweep here. Your Floridas, your Georgias, your North Carolinas, Pennsylvanias. That's what the president now needs to build in terms of a coalition of states to get him to 270. And it's too difficult and too early for us to be able to tell you whether he'll be able to do that or not.
Well, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, I think you need to get just a quick little rest because we'll be keeping you busy throughout the day. But thank you so much. And that, of course, Sherwin Bryce-Pease for us in the United States of America, just bringing us up to speed with the latest with regard to the U.S. presidential race. Well,